Hey everybody, it's Devin and James here. We're here before we enter the Den of Sin to say a little bit about the Anchor app and Anchor FM, where we record our podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
And if you're like James and myself living so far apart, we record ours and we're able to upload onto Anchor FM with no problems at all. And by hosting on Anchor, they distribute our podcast to all of the listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. It's a huge list.
It's everything you need to make a podcast in literally one place.
And you know what the best part of all is, James?
Is it because the Anchor is totally free?
It's because Anchor is totally free.
That's always the best part. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, and on to the den. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Den of Sin with Devin and James. I'm Devin Lucas, and with me always is my co-host James Dufresne. How you doing, James?
I'm doing okay, Devin. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Same old, same old. Before we get into our topic, though, I did want to. We're kind of in a prime spot. I wanted to go on a little bit of a rant, if you don't mind.
I'm more than fine with rants.
We'll get to this week's topic in just a moment, but something that was toyed with, at least in my mind, was the possibility of doing a couple or a double feature of some of the Oscar nominated movies. And then news broke what the Oscars are going to be doing this year. And there's a lot in this world that pisses me off. And I could do podcast after podcast about all sorts of beliefs and views that I hold, which I'm not going to bore you with or frustrate anyone with right here. But one thing that I think we can talk about here is what's going on with the Academy Awards, because for anybody who is a fan of film but has been living with their head underground for the past couple of months, the Academy Awards, which are coming up this Sunday, March 27th, they cut 8 categories from the main telecast, and those categories being film editing, sound, makeup, hairstyling, original score, production design, documentary short, animated short, and live action short. And to add insult to injury, because they're trying to make room for all of the musical performances, which are in a good part to have of the Oscars. But they've also just announced that they're going to have a big blowout performance of the hit song "We Don't Talk About Bruno," which from Encanto, which is a great song, but funny thing, not nominated for an Academy Award. So they've cut all these categories and then added a musical number that's not even nominated for anything. And it's really been bothering me.
I can tell.
Well, I don't know if you're like me in this respect, but when I was growing up, the Oscars were like the Super Bowl for movie nerds, you know? And I've heard that analogy 100 million times, but it's always going to be true. You know, I really didn't care about the Super Bowl. Yeah. I watched the Oscars every year. The only times I've missed the Oscars are because I was scheduled to work, and many times I've requested the night off so that I can specifically watch the Oscars. And for the last 10, 20 years, I have been getting to this point where I'm telling myself, well, it's really about the nominations, and overall, it's really kind of an overblown ceremony to begin with, and someone's favorite movie is not somebody else's favorite movie, and yada yada yada. So I've kind of had this love-hate relationship with the Oscars for the last several years. But anyone who listens to the show knows that both of us have frequently said so-and-so was robbed of an Oscar, or oh my God, it was so good, it was even nominated. So it's still ingrained in my head as this huge achievement. And if I were to ever be nominated or win myself, I know I would cry and thank my mom and my wife. And
I would hope so, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't mean to be completely cynical about the idea of the awards show, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts on it, because this is the first year that I'm going to completely sit out, and I would actually encourage all of our listeners to do the same, just to send the message.
So my feelings on the Oscars are probably a little more complicated than yours, just because year after year, I feel like Oscars usually they get it wrong a lot. And again, it's, the Academy voters are the ones to blame, but every year it seems like the actual best picture of the year is not only doesn't win, sometimes isn't even nominated. Going back to the history of the Oscars and what they were originally intended for, and then like knowing like best picture was originally meant to just be the best production, so like the biggest, fanciest, craziest movie won. Like, it wasn't about the subjective quality of the film or the artistic merits of the film. It is kind of eye-opening, but again, like, I feel like historically how many articles exist because of, which film from this year was robbed of the Oscar. So that as a viewer has pissed me off over the years because, especially if you're a big fan of certain movies that deserve the award, and then some populist film, which, not to be all film snob, but they tend to get things wrong a lot. In this instance particularly, while I do think that there are some categories that, just don't have the pizzazz and the fanfare of like best actor, best actress, best picture, I feel like so much of the actual production work of film doesn't get enough credit anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And things like, set design, so much of the artist. Yeah, sound is exactly.
Sound is half of your movie.
Yes, exactly. At least, and it has been for about 70 years or 80 years, however long talkies have been around.
I think we're creeping up on 100 now.
Yeah, but it's probably about 100 years.
It's been about, because Dracula's 90 years old.
Yes, that's true. Yes. So about 100 years. I always forget that we're in the 2020s. So I don't expect much from the Oscars anyways, as far as like it's still a money-making machine. It's still about ratings. I can understand editing it down because every year, to be devil's advocate a little bit, would I keep in best animated short in the Oscars and then lose, have a phenomenal director who you've been waiting 30 years to actually win an award, win it, and then have to have his fucking speech cut short and get played off stage? Like, there is that, like, the Oscars can only be so long. The audience can get weary.
But here's the problem with that, though. Yeah, like, we all waited a long time to see Scorsese finally get the best director, for example, which he got for a movie that I felt was far less substantial than several of the ones he's lost.
One of his weaker films ever made. Exactly. And I mean that sincerely.
And I can't personally name anybody who's won, best short animated, but in terms of the career of that person's career is going to be made by getting that spotlight and being on television for a second. And that person could be 30 years from now the person who's accepting the Academy Award for director that didn't get noticed for a long time, who is now not going to get that same shot because there's less importance placed on any of those below the line awards.
Well, to that point specifically, I fully agree with, because I feel like as somebody who likes, like, we're both artists in different ways. And, it's hard when you are an artist who doesn't have a corporation behind you, and to make it and to get so far as to be nominated. If you're a filmmaker of any kind, whether it's a documentary filmmaker, an animator, to be nominated for an Oscar is going to impact your life, period. It's going to give you opportunities. And as an artist, I fully want those people to have those opportunities. But with that said, I guarantee you 99% of the people watching the Oscars don't give a fuck. Like, they don't care. They're looking for the dresses. They're looking for the pageantry, which is, I'm not going to judge that. That's fine. Whatever. Like, to each their own.
That's fine. They can watch something else. And just the same way that I sat in my computer room instead of watching the Super Bowl this year, like.
Well, that's the thing. Like, Hollywood glamour means a lot to a lot of people, and that's fine. Like, that's cool. Like, I appreciate that.
I don't want to cut any of it.
I agree with you. I do not watch religiously. I think for me, if I look at it, now that I say it, I've probably in my lifetime maybe not watched maybe 4 Oscars. Some years I will literally see who's, the people were nominated and just get so pissed. I'm like, I'm not watching this. Like, if a certain movie, if that to me was very obviously a major accomplishment, doesn't even get nominated, like things like that will piss me off enough that I sometimes just even it's like a subconscious boycott where I'm just like, I'm not making a point of it. I'm not like telling people, I'm not preaching it, but I'll just be like, I'm not going to watch that. Fuck that this year. But then you go like, oh, you hear about, somebody who did a cool speech or some movie that. And the other thing I will say, though, that pisses me off while we're just ranting about the Oscars, I hate sweeps. I hate films that sweep.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
99% of the time, it's not even warranted. Oh, well, obviously this one movie was the biggest, most popular film of the year, so let's give them sound design, let's give them score, even though it's like, as objectively, doesn't deserve it. Like some other movie, like I've seen that, especially with costume design, movies that win the costume design, and some smaller British film, the costume design is a much bigger accomplishment. But then I don't know. And again, this is all subjective, of course. It's my personal feelings. But I will say, to your point in this case, I feel like those categories that are getting eliminated. Yes, those categories probably don't appeal to a mass audience as much as they do like to people like us who care about film production. And I personally am very it upsets me that they're getting cut out, but I'm sure the majority of people don't give a fuck, which is just that, it's upsetting.
I think the problem is, though, that the people who don't give a fuck have already given up on the Oscars. The Oscars haven't had the numbers since Titanic, and Titanic, I love that as a milestone anyways, because that was really one of the last, maybe Lord of the Rings would be in there too. The last time that a truly populist film came around, won Best Picture, and there wasn't an uproar about it because everyone kind of agreed, yeah, hell yeah, that was like an incredible production. It's amazing it was even pulled off. But it's amazing that any of these movies are pulled off. And when I hear people bitch and moan about Spider-Man not being nominated, for example, this year, Spider-Man No Way Home, I understand the bitching and moaning about it. And I actually think that was a better film than say Don't Look Up, which I enjoyed, but I was shocked to see that was nominated. But I didn't expect to see Spider-Man nominated, and I didn't want it to be nominated because I don't think that Spider-Man is competing in that same lane. It is art. It is absolutely art. The movie made me cry. I saw it in the theater. I will probably see it again, and then I will probably never see it again after that. But that's my experience. But this idea that Spider-Man deserves to be nominated because it was such a big film, it's getting up to reaching like billions of dollars, and it's only going to make more money as time goes on because even the failing DVD market, people are going to buy Spider-Man.
Yeah. Or buy it digitally.
Yeah.
I did.
so like in terms of it being rewarded, yeah, it's been rewarded. So I really don't like the idea of the new fan favorite thing that they're doing either. The Twitter in for everybody at home's favorite movie of the year, because there's already a Johnny Depp movie that's rising in candidacy right now that nobody saw, but like the last remaining group of like Johnny Depp aficionados keep on voting it in.
See, there's an extra. I mean, we're not going to go down this road, but
yeah,
I love Johnny Depp.
I
love him. I've loved him as long as he's been like literally, Friday or Nightmare on Elm Street. He's Johnny Depp. He's, cool. And I think he has gotten a bum rap over the years. Some of it warranted, lots of it not. But there's also this whole political thing because of people thinking he got railroaded and that, because he hit everything with him and Amber Heard. It's the whole thing that we do not.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that particular one. I don't think that there's a bad guy in that situation, or there's two bad guys in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, with that said, as somebody who waited their entire, the majority of my life, I wanted to see superhero movies not just exist, but to be popular enough that we, I wore comic book t-shirts to school when nobody did that. It was, 1988, going to school in a comic book t-shirt was, if I wasn't so large, if I wasn't like the tallest kid in school, it probably would have been a dangerous thing even. But I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. Loved it. Like it gets to my soul. And even I know it's an accomplishment in its own way. It doesn't fit into what it's trying to do is too broad. Its vision is too broad.
Its achievements only apply to itself.
Yeah. And to its genre and to even the Spider-Man mythos. Like it's accomplishments in all different ways. It's not a film that is. This might be a pessimistic point of view, But to me, like the films that win Oscars are achievements of either a singular vision or like a partnership of a vision. But it's usually like, God, I mean, I know sometimes you and I fight the instinct to be, arty farty or high,
Snobby.
falutin,
snobby.
But the films that win Oscars or should win Oscars should be like a piece of personal statement, or they should say something. They should be unique to and of themselves in what they're doing. They should be unique, ideally, like they should change film. When a film exists that's literally the product of a conglomerate that's like, and again, I love them, and I like populist films. I mean, some of my favorite movies are not only like popular films, but they're, subjectively bad films. But yeah, I will be that guy that, diehard nerd, diehard comic guy till the day I die. And even I will tell you, it doesn't deserve, like, if this was 1950 and it was still best production, fuck yes, give it to Spider-Man No Way Home. It definitely deserves it in those parameters and that distinction and what that award was about. But that's not what it's about anymore. Because to your point, the movies that usually should ideally be winning Oscars are movies that aren't going to make 300 million. They're not going to make, they ideally, and again, I'm making all these like sort of making grand gesture statements here, but they should be important films that like help develop the language of cinema. Not saying that Spider-Man No Way Home didn't do that in its own way, in its own niche or whatever, but it's not the same. That's my point.
Exactly. Like I said, I loved it. I took my my family. We all loved it. But here's the thing, in terms of like being award worthy, it was necessary that 7 other movies had to be released prior to Spider-Man No Way Home for Spider-Man No Way Home to even make sense. And
exactly,
there is nothing about Aunt May's character, for example, that is in any way tragic in her death if you don't have 7 movies and a comic book series getting to know
the entire conceit of it is showing the history of the Spider-Man mythology in film history, and the differences in playing up, like, to your point, especially this movie, because if you nominate this, I agree 100% with your point. It's a phenomenal point, and I agree. And look, if you're listening to this podcast and you disagree with us, that's totally fine. We're not saying that Spider-Man No Way Home isn't an accomplishment, and that it is a great popcorn movie and
it deserves
filled with
every
heart
dollar
and good
it's
intention.
Made. It deserves every million of dollars that it's made.
The performances in the movie are phenomenal. Willem Dafoe for this short thing, phenomenal. Andrew Garfield, who I've never liked, was so likable in this. Marissa Tomei, she's fucking phenomenal in everything. She is the heart of this. I mean, really, she is the epicenter of this film and what that film said. Look, we're not this podcast.
Yes. We're getting sidetracked.
And obviously we're fans, but anyway. Yeah. But to your point, Devin, I agree with you 100%. I feel like because ratings are low, the Oscars are doing anything to sort of keep people interested, to appeal to the broadest, but it's kind of going against everything the Oscars originally were even about, which is the celebration of film and film production and awarding the people that deserve it. If your film is nominated for a fucking production design Academy Award, you deserve to be on TV.
Exactly.
Because that is such a vital part of film. So,
and I'll also say Spider-Man No Way Home would have absolutely sucked without its editor. So let's give some love to 100%. The fucking editors.
Oh, and I mean, editors are, yeah.
And the final thing I'll say on it before we move on is I don't want to rant without giving any kind of a possible solution, but I do have an idea that's kind of springboarding off of different ideas I've read online and heard in other podcasts, because somehow we're not the only podcast talking about this. But I've heard different allusions to the idea that maybe it should be played more like the Super Bowl. And I actually heard a really good idea where what if you gave the Oscars a halftime show and you had all of the things that were being trimmed pre-show, and then because most people don't watch all of the Super Bowl anyways. Yeah. They come in and they watch the last 2 quarters after the and the halftime show. So if the halftime show comes on, you got an alert on your phone, the halftime show's on, that's when you tune in to catch all the razzle dazzle and to see the awards that are above the line. Because right now they're shooting themselves in the foot because the people that they're trying to appeal to have already given up on the Oscars. This decision only alienates the few people that we're still watching. So it just seems like a dumb plan. My idea would be even kind of grander than that. I think that you should take it streaming. You make a really long show. I would even add categories like best casting director, best stunt.
Yeah,
I think best stunt would become one of those awards. Like who would Fast and the Furious could finally be eligible for an Academy Award. I don't care about that franchise, but if we're talking about people loving populist films, best stunt would be something that would be worthy of Academy placement. The
plus a couple of drunk stuntmen winning, like giving a speech. I want to see that. That to me is worth watching.
Yes, and do what the Golden Globes got right, which was the only thing Golden Globes got right, which is allow them to drink during the broadcast.
Right.
But I would actually expand it to have 5 different categories for Best Picture, and I think that that would solve a lot of problems. And I know 5 sounds like a lot, but keep in mind we already have 3. Okay, or actually, no, I take it back. That's 6. It would be the already existing Best Animated Feature, Best Documentary Feature, and Best Foreign Feature. And then you add, for instead of regular just boring old Best Picture, you have Best Picture with a budget of less than $5 million, Best Picture for anything within $5 million to $100 million, and Best Picture for anything above $100 million as a budget. And that way you would definitely have some Marvel and DC stuff and some Star Wars stuff probably hitting the nomination list in that case. And you would still have a whole category for all the indie films that get completely lost in the shuffle even now. And you could have a whole block of like the best pictures of the year. And I think people would tune in for just that. And if it's streaming, you don't got to worry about the time. The streamer, say it's Netflix or Disney Plus, even because Disney owns ABC, where the Oscars are at home now. They could send out notifications to subscribers saying, okay, now we're at halftime, or now we're at, the bigger awards, or now we're at the technical awards. And they can use the internet to their advantage to create the show that it actually deserves to be and to award as many people as deserve it. I'm a fan of all those ideas, especially the idea of breaking it up, multiple best pictures, because again, a lot of what goes into even nominating films is money, it's advertisements and stuff. And, not little $5 million films don't always have that opportunity. I would even go so far as to do that, but then also still do best film of the year. Like, best
so that
film overall. Yeah. I'd be okay with that.
I will say though, I think you'd get a lot of people complaining that it's streaming because it loses that,
Well, not everybody can play.
Yeah. But I will say, as you so perfectly stated, they have lost the audience that they really are trying to keep. Like, you cater to the people that are tuning in, the people that are fans of cinema, of film, and of specifically the history of the Oscars and what it means to win that award. But I mean, ultimately, they're going to do what they're going to do to try to boost ratings. We'll have to see year to year what they do, but I can tell you that last year's Oscars weren't so hot. So
no, and they fucked that up too with their little gimmick of trying to give Chadwick Boseman a posthumous Oscar backfiring on them. That was amazing. That was watching that kind of a fail on live television was, I do have to say, that was something special. And makes it all the easier to boycott them this year. I'm not gonna lie, I'm literally more interested in seeing what the ratings are for the Oscars this year than I am in finding out who wins Best Picture.
Right, I feel you.
Which is sad. Like, I'm ashamed to say that, but that's where I'm at.
I also don't think I've seen one Best Picture yet, one Best Picture nominated film this year, and that's usually, I guess that's actually, for the last few years, a lot of the films that are nominated are, I'm like, but 2 years ago, saw probably the majority of them before the Oscars, but I don't know, year to year. But either way, we could talk about the subject all night.
Yeah.
But to your point, let's maybe when after the Oscars we can save a spot to discuss what the ratings were overall, what the popular opinion was on the Oscars, because I mean it's an interesting topic. If you're a film fan, like, it's an interesting topic.
Exactly, and I say add more to it. I mean, Best Cast would have maybe gotten Boogie Nights a win.
Yep.
So, it opens possibilities.
It's funny that you say that. I literally was lamenting, not that long ago, maybe a month ago, that when you watch a great ensemble, the fact that there's no best ensemble or like the.
I say
the
you
fact
give it to the casting director. Like, not
Yeah.
you don't give the individual awards to, you know, they still compete for best actor, actress, supporting, and whatever.
Yeah, but that's the thing is like a movie like chose a perfect example, Boogie Nights. Like anybody in that movie could have honestly literally deserved it. That ensemble cast from start to finish, even the people that don't had very short screen times, the William H. Macy's, the Philip Seymour Hoffmans. If any one of them won, I would have been happy. They were that. It's just that there's a magic when you have a brilliant cast playing off of each other who really has that dynamic with the director that it's something different from than just a handful of performances in a good movie. You know what I mean? Like,
I agree.
When you have an entire
the Spider-Man movie could have been nominated for best cast.
Agreed, 100%. 100%. I agree with you. But
All
yeah,
right.
we'll move on.
We've had so many false starts on moving on.
Exactly. Real quick before you go on though, Devin, I did want to just quickly mention that we had talked now on two podcasts about me seeing What's Up, Doc. I had forgotten to watch it until about 30 minutes before we started watching. So I'm about 20 minutes in. So, but I'm enjoying it so far. You know, I will definitely on the next podcast, I'll give a review. I'm liking it. But I promised I would watch it, and I kept forgetting. I've had a lot on my plate recently. But by the next podcast, in fact, as soon as we're finished with this, I'm going to put it on while I work. So,
all right, cool. I'm looking forward to that. I had honestly forgotten, but I'm looking forward to it. Well, tonight's topic, now that we're 3 hours in, we're modeling this after the Oscars. We're just going to go long. And if I start to talk any more about
to be fair, I think we're modeling after ourselves because we have a tendency to go long. So,
well, I'm just waiting for you to play me off. But this week we have chosen a really interesting double feature. I'll have to give a little bit of an explanation here. We decided to do a cannibal double feature, 2 cannibal movies in honor of the new Hulu film. And this isn't no conflict of interest here. I chose the film, not James, who may or may not work for a certain streamer. Their new movie, Fresh. And we decided to do this before either one of us had even seen Fresh. And so I suggested, why don't we pair it up with Eating Raoul from 1982? Because I had heard that Fresh was satirical and had some laughs to go along with the scares. And of course, Eating Raoul is not a scary movie at all.
No.
But I thought, funny cannibals. Okay, it sounds good. And then once I saw Fresh, I realized these movies are very mismatched. But it's going to be fun to talk about both of them anyways, because we don't get many opportunities. And
yeah, and I will say, if we say like, we're doing a cannibal, I mean, both of the films are still pretty left of what I think a lot. We're not reviewing Raw or
even Texas Chainsaw
Massacre 2. Like, these are takes on the cannibal. I mean, Eating Raoul is, if we're being honest, is barely a cannibal movie. That's not even the point.
In my memory, it was a much bigger cannibal movie. When I mentioned it, you had said, I haven't seen that in a long time. And I said, I saw it a couple years ago. And this is what's funny, is I realized as I was watching it again for the podcast, this is a movie I've told people for years. This is one of my favorite comedies. It's so funny. It's so satirical. But once I started watching it, I realized I think that I've just watched the first half hour of the movie about 10 times over the last 10 years. I tend to watch movies late at night because my family's gone to bed and they don't have the same tastes as I do. And so a lot of times I fall asleep, even though the movie's not boring at all. I haven't watched Eating Raoul in probably 10, 15 years. And I had forgotten. I thought, I'll get into the plot stuff when we get to Eating Raoul. I thought that there was more cannibalism involved in my memory. Well, let's go ahead and start with Eating Raoul. That way, as always, this is going to be spoiler-tastic. There's no way you can talk at length, especially about Fresh, without being very spoilery. So let's go ahead and save the new meat for later, for anyone that plans to see it, and talk about the spoilers on the 40-year-old spoilers, basically. What was your relationship with Eating Raoul, James? When did you first see this?
So it's funny. There's a story to this. So when you suggested it, I was like, oh yeah, of course, I'm a fan of that movie, fan of the filmmakers and the people involved, but I'll get to that more into that in a bit. But like when you watch so many movies, you're not going to recall the first time you saw it all the time. But kind of when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I probably saw that with you. Like I probably watched it with you and our friend Ben or whatever.
I have some vague memories of you being in the room too.
But I remembered that's actually not where I saw it. I might have seen it with you guys at one point, but I remember literally going to Blockbuster. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't Blockbuster. Was it Hollywood Video? It was actually like a chain. It was a local chain one, but they had a cult section. And I was with some friends, and we were all going to rent a movie to watch that night, but we couldn't agree. And we probably rented Lost Boys for the 1000th time or whatever. But I wanted to rent. It was on my account, and I remember being like, "Oh, I want to rent some movies I hadn't seen." When everybody's gone, I'll rent some movies for myself that all these all my friends aren't cool enough to appreciate. And like I said, I don't know if it was Hollywood Video or Blockbuster or whatever, but it wasn't like a cool mom and pop stuff. It was like I remember being like one of those locally. So it didn't have the coolest like cult film section. It wasn't all like handpicked by like some hipster kid. But I remember going through and I rented some horror movies. I actually think I'm even remembering it now. I think it was the first time I saw Clown House, which is a notorious movie.
Yeah, we've talked about that here before.
Yeah. But I remember, and I got EATING RAOUL, and I didn't know anything about it. I remember just seeing the cover and realizing I'd heard of this movie. It's got a very memorable cover and the name. But so I took it home, and again, I had literally just like maybe 2 weeks before had been watching Rock and Roll High School. So it starts immediately, and I'm like, oh shit! It's it's them. Paul Bartel and Mary Woronov.
Yes,
and who are both in it, and we'll get more into them specifically in a bit. But yeah, so that was the first time I watched it. I remember really liking it. The fact at first I didn't like it because I was expecting it to be more not lascivious, but not that there isn't some nudity and stuff in it, but I just thought it was going to be sleazier. I thought it was going to be more like Basket Case. Yeah. And it's not. It's far more, it's even, Basket Case itself is satirical, but in a different way. But yeah, I just remember, like, at first I was like, this is what I want. But
it's almost like John Waters light in a weird way.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And the thing is, if you know Paul Bartel and his movies, it totally makes sense. And then years later, realizing that Paul Bartel directed Death Race 2000, which, was, I have a tattoo of Carradine's Frankenstein. I love the movie that much. And then thinking about the vibe of that movie, I'm like, it makes total sense. Like, he definitely has a voice. And realizing that it was really unique and dryly funny and weird, but in a really smart, and the film is set in the 80s, but, at the time I think I watched it, was probably early 2000s. It felt dated, but now I think because it's so far away that it doesn't, everything I watch is like late 70s, early 80s at this point. But yeah, it's again, it's more of a commentary on a lot of things. It's a commentary on people who want things they don't deserve, or think they deserve things they don't really deserve. And it's about, on one hand, like the main characters, Paul and Mary, you root for them, but they're not, they're killing people and, for money, but the people they're killing are like bona fide rapists and like, sexual deviants and stuff. But there's a lot to it. It's actually very John Waters in the sense of like, there's nobody's right in this. They're all layers of wrong, but you still root for, the main characters, even though they literally are murderers and thieves. And at the very end, yes, they are actual cannibals. But it's more of a financial decision than it is some sort of depraved, backwoods need to eat, human flesh. It's more of a means to an end at the very end. But I love it. I was excited when you talked about it because I hadn't thought about the movie in a long time. I love Paul Bartel. I love Mary Woronov. She is a literal cult film icon. The movies that she's been in. She's
a legend. Yeah.
She is a literal legend. Going back to Warhol. She's just literally like a legend. But
when she was she was in the Warhol factory, and this was, I think her first film was Death Race 2000. But
yes, it was.
Yeah.
She was in stage before that, I believe.
But her stage name prior to becoming a cult film actor was Penny Arcade. And I still love that as a name.
I know. Yeah, me too.
Penny Arcade's just so awesome. She actually, I have a couple of quotes here. One is from her and one is from Bartel, and it touches upon a previous point you were making. But Woronov said, because, coming from the Warhol factory, she said, I knew what was art and what was shit. but sometimes the shit was more interesting. Which I think was great. And then Paul Bartel, who wrote and directed this and plays Paul Bland. They both have their actual names, by the way.
Yeah, the first names.
Paul and Mary, and the last name is Bland.
Shea Bland, which I just like. That's so like perfect.
Paul Bartel said, I wanted to make a film about two greedy, uptight people who are at the same time not so unlike you and me and Nancy and Ronnie, referring to the Reagans at the time, to keep it funny and yet communicate something about the psychology and perversity of those values. My movie touches on many things: the perversion of middle-class values, the resurgence of Nixonism, machismo versus WASP fastidiousness, and film noir.
Yep.
Now, I don't actually see the elements of film noir he's speaking of, but everything else,
it's funny.
Things very loud and clear.
I think it not at all in the visual presentation at all, but I think the like there are themes where it's like there's cheating going on, or there's like, you know, there's the interpersonal dynamics, the fact that they're thieves and murderers that are like, I can see some noir themes. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, in the presentation, not at all. Paul Bartel, I love him. Like, I think he deserves more credit.
Yeah, he's dying,
but not a visual.
No, he's not a particularly great visual director per se.
No.
Although there has been some incredible costume and set designs, especially in Death Race 2000.
You'll never hear me say a bad word about Death Race 2000.
Now, if you look at his entire filmography, I mean, it's really just dying to be kind of re-examined by the next wave of film fans, because his feature debut, Private Parts, is an amazing little oddity. Every time I watch it, I'm curious what Criterion Collection would do with it, because it's got that sort of. Does it have
any kind of recent release though at all?
No, I mean, you can buy it digitally now, but the last time it was available, it was put on DVD, and that's how I found it. I was actually surfing through one of those $3 bins at Big Lots many years ago, back when the $3 bins used to be full of like all the MGM titles, like all the Woody Allen stuff. And I came across this movie called Private Parts that wasn't the Howard Stern movie. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Like, just out of curiosity. And as soon as I saw that Paul Bartel wrote and directed it, like, I had to have it. And I watched it that night, and it's so bizarre. It's so weird. It's a little dirtier than this film. And then he does Death Race 2000 for Roger Corman and kind of gets pigeonholed as the race car guy. So he goes on to do Cannonball in 76, which is probably best remembered, and rightly so, for having a scene in which Paul Bartel eats a bucket of Colonel Sanders chicken with Martin Scorsese and Sly Stallone pre-Rocky, or right around that time. And he has another film called Not for Publication that I need to see that just recently got released by Kino, I believe. But it stars Nancy Allen and David Naughton from An American Werewolf in London. And it's his screwball comedy, so it probably would make an interesting pairing with What's Up, Doc? And then the last thing that he made, well, he continued to work until 1993 in film, and he continued to direct for a while beyond that. Unfortunately, he passed away in the year 2000. The last one that I'll mention as kind of one of his biggies on his filmography was Lust in the Dust. And part of why I mentioned that is because I've seen it. It's not particularly great. If people like silly movies, you might get something out of it, but it is probably best known for being pretty much the only major film that Divine did that wasn't directed by John Waters.
That's right. And I mean, reunites her in Tab Hunter, which is, you know, from Polyester. Is it a great movie? No, but I think it has some great elements to it. I think if you're a fan of Divine, you should definitely watch it because it's a totally different role for her. And then again, it is weird that it's a reuniting of Divine and Tab Hunter, but it's not John Waters. And it is a comedy and it has some satirical elements, but it's not the same thing. Like, it's in a totally different ballpark. And I find I'm a Divine fan, and specifically I like her with Tab Hunter. But yeah, it's not a phenomenal movie, but I think it's an interesting movie and worth watching.
I don't think it's an essential movie overall, but I think it's an essential movie to any discussion of Paul Bartel. I think it's if you're a fan of Bartel, you absolutely need to see Lust in the Dust and at least have an opinion on it. I also really liked his scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills out of 1989, but
have not seen.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. I think it's on DVD now or on Blu-ray, but I haven't seen it in a long while. I just remember it being charming and a little bit not unlike Eating Raoul in its sense of humor.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of entitled people doing snobby things.
That's what it sounded like. Yeah. One thing I do want to say, though, because as a horror nerd, and Mary Woronov has been in lots of very memorable classic, but my favorite reference specifically to this movie is that in the 1986 classic, and I'm using that in my sense of the term, film Chopping Mall, not only are Paul Bartel and Mary Woronov in it, but they are playing the same characters. They are playing Paul and Mary Bland, which is a great little Easter egg. I love it. If you've never seen Chopping Mall, maybe I don't. First off, what are you doing listening to this podcast? But I guess we don't. I mean, we venture into other areas. You don't have to all go into 80s killer robot movies. But anyways, it's a great movie. I love it, and just seeing them show up is so rad. So
yeah, it is a lot of fun. I love Chopping Mall. And what's his name? Wynorski, the director. Jim Wynorski. Yes. He'd be an interesting one for re-examination too. Although a lot of it becomes kind of the Skinamax type stuff. And he's now making Hallmark movies. So
of course he is.
He just kind of knows where the money is.
Yeah. He did some real trash, like real trash, but just for the fact that he did Return of the Swamp Thing, which is a movie I like way more than I should, he'll always be, I'll always love him. Anyways, it's different. We can talk about Jim. I'm down for a Jim Wynorski episode, but anyways, to stay on point.
Maybe a grab bag more than an episode.
Exactly. Yeah, because we don't need to talk about Komodo versus Cobra or Dino Croc versus Super Gator.
If you say so, man.
I mean, unless you want to. I mean, I'll watch them. I'm just saying, nobody needs to watch camel spiders and talk about it. But with that said, the thing I like about this movie is it hits you with its tone right from the start. Within the first scene, you know what this movie's going to be.
You know exactly where you are with Eating Raoul.
Absolutely. When he's working in the liquor store and it gets robbed, with the owner who's chastising him for buying expensive wine just shoots the fucking robber and then just continues the conversation like, hey, anyways, I told you not to buy this wine, Paul. And it's just right away you're like, oh, I get it. I know what this movie's gonna be.
Right.
And right from there, if you're on board from that scene, you'll love the rest of the movie.
Right. And it's a great little story because it is so simple. Paul and Mary Bland are a married couple. I think they say at some point they've been together for 10 years. And they live in like this perfect little apartment that's completely decorated in all like 50s, 60s furniture, which apparently was like in real life the apartment of like a friend of theirs mom's or something like this. This was done super, super low budget. And they shot in that apartment because of the furniture that was in it, not because of the apartment, because they felt that the 50s aesthetic was going to add to their story. And it certainly does.
It's a plot point even. I mean, they mention it, so.
Yeah, Paul works in a liquor store where he's trying to sell fancy ass wine to people that are just looking for $2 chuck. And Mary is a nurse, and they both dream of opening their own restaurant, which at one point was going to be called Chez Bland, and then they ultimately decided to do Paul and Mary's Country Kitchen.
Yeah,
based on the location that they want to purchase. And the thing is, in order to get the location for their restaurant, they have to impress this guy who's the real estate broker, and they have to be able to make the right offer to him. Well, Paul ends up losing his job because he bought crates and crates of this $500 a bottle wine that he's trying to sell off at the liquor store. And so now that he has no job, they think that their restaurant is at risk. And they're also at the same time plagued by the fact that this is so ridiculous. Their apartment complex has been overrun by swingers who are constantly having swinger parties, and it's just messing up their day because Paul and Mary are a very proper old-fashioned couple, and they even sleep in twin beds like Lucy and Ricky.
Exactly. I was going to mention that. It's very like a very wholesome 50s version of marriage.
And keeping in mind in real life, Paul Bartel is gay, and Mary Woronov is some sort of like I think she might be from Mars. But
Exactly. Truly.
I mean, she's beautiful, but strikingly different look than anybody else I can think of.
Yeah, 100%. She's this like lanky alien like lady that has a very, her whole vibe is very unique. That's why I think she's a good actress, but because she's so herself and so unique, she has her own like, she's cornered her market like, and she's kind of irreplaceable. But yes, as you were saying, there's like they live this sort of
This
wholesome
life,
this chase like very like uptight, the opposite of sexual freedom. And it was making a point in the 80s when everything was sex obsessed, and
they end up they're attacked in their own house by a stray swinger who happens to knock on the wrong door and won't take no as an answer. And Paul is forced to kill him before he takes advantage of Mary. And they now run into this problem of like, well, now we're broke, we're never going to get the restaurant, and we have a dead body to dispose of. They find the guy's wallet, and it has $600 cash, which is going to help them towards the down payment for their restaurant. So they scheme that maybe they're going to start promoting Mary as a dominatrix in the building and lure men in and kill them for their wallets, which is just such a convoluted way. It's the longest way to go around mugging a person ever.
And I love the line, "These swinger types always seem to have money." The justification is incredible, but
this movie was so low budget they couldn't even print up their own fake ads for Mary's dominatrix service. So they actually printed a real ad in LA Express.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And got some responses that went unanswered. But maybe on Instagram or something, if it'll pass their standards, I might. There's some good pictures of Mary and Paul advertising her dominatrix service, and it's so clear that neither of these people know what's actually what's going on.
What this is, yeah.
But anyways, that's when they get a visit from Raoul, who is posing as a security specialist, a security system specialist in the building, and he comes in to give them an estimate on how much it's going to cost to make their apartment secure from any other break-ins or intruders. And in actuality, Raoul is a cat thief. Is that what it's called?
Cat burglar.
Cat burglar. Sneaks in at night to rob them, and he happens to do this on a night where they've got an extra dead body laying around. So now he's also got the drop on them for being murderers. But instead of being freaked out, he knows what to do with the bodies. So he makes a deal with them. You keep the money that's in the wallet, you give me the body, and I'll take care of the rest, and I'll split what I get for the body with you. Which they're a little confused about because they don't see the intrinsic value. Meanwhile, Raoul is selling off the dead person's car, and he's selling off their clothes and other belongings. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Spoiler alert. It turns out he's also selling the bodies to a local dog food company.
Yeah.
My memory of the movie from seeing it 10, 15 years ago was that they disposed of the bodies by cooking it for their restaurant, and that they end up getting a reputation for having this amazing dish that they have to serve at their restaurant. I was way off. Now, they do become cannibals by the end of the story. This is a cannibal movie, and the cannibal double feature sticks. But had I remembered that the bulk of the bodies in the movie were going to the dog food company, I don't think I would have recommended it. But I didn't want to change it because I love the movie so much. I don't know when.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, again, it is still the whole. It's called Eating Raoul for a reason. So. Exactly.
Yes, and I'll leave it up to the audience if they want to see this and find out how they end up eating Raoul specifically. But when the title's the spoiler, I figure that's pretty safe.
Exactly.
It gets more and more ridiculous from there as Mary starts to have feelings for Raoul, and Raoul falls madly in love with Mary, and Paul starts to get jealous and starts to wonder if maybe Raoul should be taken out of the picture, and Raoul starts to wonder if maybe Paul should be taken out of the picture, and Mary seems to fall on whatever side of whoever she happens to be in the room with. And when Raoul gives her those funny cigarettes, she tends to fall right in his lap.
Tie stick. Oh,
Tie stick, yes. Ed Begley Jr. brought the tie stick. Lots of fun little, not even cameos because it's 1982, but a lot of early appearances by people like Ed Begley Jr. or John Paragon from John B. the Genie.
Let's talk about this real quick because you got Buck Henry, the amazing Buck Henry.
Buck Henry
is in this.
I had forgotten until this week that Buck Henry was in it. In fact, that was the moment where I'm like, okay, I haven't seen this in a while because I forgot. How could I forget Buck Henry?
He's got one of the more memorable scenes too. Lots of like sexual assault in this movie. We should also point out it is a comedy, but there is a lot of sexual assault in it.
Both of these movies are very triggering. So if you couldn't tell from the name, Cannibal Movie Double Feature.
Yeah. But it also has Don Steele, the real Don Steele.
The real Don Steele.
Which is still a part of my childhood, who has legendary relationship with Paul Bartel, Death Race 2000, Rock and Roll High School, Eating Raoul. He was in Gremlins. He's in the amazing artistic accomplishment Kiss Meets Phantom of the Park. A lot of times he's playing a radio DJ, that was his real job.
Yeah, James and I grew up listening to him on KHJ and then KRTH in Los Angeles.
KRF 101, the real Don Steele. Anyways, but great cast. I mean, there's like, if you're watching close enough, you may recognize a lot of people. But yeah, the cast is great. At one point there's like, Nazi fetishist. There's a pirate fetishist but it's also a pirate fetishist who wants to kill Minnie Mouse. There's a lot of just like bizarre like things going on, but
Ed Begley Jr. is a role play. He likes to hippie role play.
Yeah, like he's a square guy. Like you can tell he's a square who always wanted to be a cool hippie.
Doesn't he say he's a Vietnam vet at one point when he starts to freak out on her, and that's his kink is to be the Vietnam protesters?
Oh, something maybe. Like I don't remember that, but I know he's like because he's got money. Yeah, and like so like again they keep putting it that like all these perverts are rich and like I think he's like a bank it's like some sort of banker or something, but either way he's like a nerdy guy who wants to pretend he's hip and smoking the doobies and like getting the hippie chick, but he's basically goes to rape her essentially, and there's a lot of that, but but played for laughs, very weird, but it is a 1982 film. I mean again that at least all the rapists get their murdered, so
before they can commit the act as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's attempted, but
they have to make Paul mad. That was a funny moment in the movie because like at one point she's working a guy over pretending to be a dominatrix, and she has to go and find Paul.
Yes, a baby, an adult baby.
Yes, adult baby. That's what it was.
Yeah, creepy.
Yeah, she has to go and find Paul. Like, what are you doing? Why aren't you coming out and killing this guy? Well, he hasn't made me angry yet. I can't kill him unless he makes me angry.
Yeah.
and their choice of weapon, by the way, is frying pan.
That's my other favorite thing in the movie is that it's like he's like basically tapping their head and murdering them, but the whole thing is that it's a frying pan is the weapon of mass murder in this.
She sends him out at one point, or he's running somewhere else. She goes, "Can you also pick me up a new pan? I feel a little squeamish about cooking anything in the one that we used for killing."
Exactly. I love that part too. Let's real quick because we haven't mentioned him. Robert Beltran, who, to be honest, I wasn't a fan. Like I hated him in Night of the Comet. I just didn't like his character. But he's great. He's great in this. He is the titular Raoul. I think most people know him from being on Star Trek, being on Voyager. He's on Star Trek. I'm blanking on which one, but he plays the Raoul, who's the thief that kind of gets the ball really rolling with but he's trying to have an affair. He does have an affair, but
yeah,
but he's really great in it. And like, there's a sequence where I really like where there's this. I'm forgetting how they know her, but she's a professional dominatrix or prostitute. And so they get her help they get her help to like give them suggestions, but then he asks her to basically try and like get him to leave Mary alone, to either go back to Mexico, which, I mean, there's a lot of the movie smartly plays on race, even though Raul is like, very 80s Mexican guy. Like he's far more sophisticated. Like he's not like, he's like, I don't know. It's an interesting way. Like there's some sometimes it's stereotypical and he's playing a very 80s Mexican guy, but in a lot of ways he's not, and he's smarter than like, I don't know, it's an interesting little character that he's playing, but he is so much of the movie roots on you really disliking this guy or being afraid of this guy or whatever, and I think he does a really good job, and I feel like we could hype up the rest of the cast, but he does deserve his props.
No, you're absolutely right. He's fantastic in it, and I'm not as familiar with him. I know he's been in a few things, and he's in a couple other Paul Bartel films too.
Yeah, later on. Yeah, it's funny because he was a stage guy. Like when he was trying to do something else for stage, and then the casting director was like, "Oh, you're not ready for this, but you might be right for this movie." And he's like, "I don't, whatever." And then Paul Bartel reached out to him, and he's like, "What have you done?" He's like, "Well, maybe you've seen Secret Cinema." And he's like, "No." He's like, "Well, maybe you've seen this." He's like, "No." He's like, "Well, I also did Death Race 2000," and weirdly, that was the movie where he's like, "You did Death Race 2000?" That's the power of Death Race 2000. So
that's pretty awesome. And I have to say this for him too. The movie itself is really a two-hander with Mary and Paul.
Yeah.
But the real life Mary and Paul, they were clearly friends. They had worked together so many times, both as writer, director, and collaborator, but also as performers together. So there was a deep friendship there. And Robert Beltran has to come in and be the third wheel. And he's literally the third wheel in this relationship on screen. But in real life, he's also a third wheel to a acting couple who have this incredible history. And he really holds his own. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Raoul could have been such a throwaway character, even though he was written to be a certain way and played by a lot of other actors. I think he would have been pretty forgettable. But,
and very one-dimensional. Yes, I agree.
Beltran comes in and he brings a depth to the two-dimensionalness of it. And by the two-dimensionalness, I mean the two-dimensionalism that is written into the script. It's intentionally a two-dimensional character.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of noir elements to it where people are playing almost like archetypes.
Yeah.
And the one thing is like that he does where like he is very believable in being this like kind of like street smart, criminal and stuff. But there's the way that he's playing it is he doesn't seem cartoonish. Like although he's playing an archetype, he's not like a cartoonish archetype. He's playing with certain, even like with his dialogue and the lingo. And then, at one point, like the sex worker who's trying to get him to like, she's playing these different characters. She's playing a nurse. She's playing like basically like a not a border agent, but like a immigration officer.
Yeah.
Like they're playing with like lingo. I don't know. It's smart and very memorable, and it's just I thought it was really well done. And I do think that while it's not necessarily it's not some very raw cannibal movie in the way that some people might think. I think it's using the cannibal idea with these characters to show the lengths that people will go to get what they want. And, these people who think that they're these moral people, that they're not these sex addicts or these, low lives, that they're, just trying to start their dream business of being restaurateurs. They're just as corrupt and fucked up and, ruthless as anybody. And, it's a great movie. I think Paul Bartel should be more celebrated. I also wish Paul Bartel made more movies, and I wish he had made more movies in that style. Really, his vision and stuff, and his sense of humor, because there's not a lot of things like them. But yeah, I love it. I'm glad you suggested it because, I hadn't thought about it in a while, but I was a fan originally, and then rewatching it, just like it's one. I honestly think it's one of those movies. The more you watch it, I think the more you'll even get out of it.
I agree. I'm going to watch it all the way through more often now than just
just the first 30.
And I completely agree that I wish that there was more Bartel out there, Bartel directed films out there.
Because he was pretty prolific as an actor. He showed up in a lot of things. So
he's in a lot of stuff of all sorts of genres and stuff. And some of his directing took him into television. And the last things that he directed were episodes of the Clueless TV series.
He's one of those guys, if you see him on screen once, though, you will remember, like, every time you see him, you're like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, yeah, he's just that guy. Like, his performance is...
Everybody knows Paul Bartel and Mary Woronov. You just need to see their face to see them and go, oh yeah. And unfortunately, your thought may go back to, he was in Caddyshack too. But
that's
But before we move on to the next thing, speaking of last Bartel films or more Bartel films, just before he passed away, he was working on a sequel to Eating Raoul. Did you hear about this?
No.
It was going to be called Bland Ambition. And
love it.
Apparently there was a version of this, and I don't know how much of this is just internet lore or not, but apparently at some point Chevy Chase was slated to be a person who knew of Mary and Paul's cannibalistic ways and was using it to blackmail them. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I do know that Paul Bartel himself talked about this movie Bland Ambition and what its plot was going to be, and I don't know where Chevy Chase fits in. But I'm just going to read it straight as Paul said it himself. It starts with Paul and Mary Bland happily ensconced in their country kitchen where they're doing a land office business. The arrogant young governor of California stops off to have lunch and is furious he is not recognized and permitted to jump the line. In retaliation, he sends a health inspector to close down the country kitchen, and Paul and Mary are encouraged by the media to retaliate in kind and run against him for governor of California. In order to improve their family image for their political sitcom, they secretly adopt a little girl who turns out to be just right of the bad seed. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it could have been fun. I would have liked to have seen what their gubernatorial campaign was like. And you can tell just by ways that he describes it himself, these are meant to be very two-dimensional characters played in really absurd ways.
Broad, yes, exactly. What year would that have been, you said?
Well, he died in 2000, and it was
2000, yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been probably 20 years after the original Eating Raoul.
That's interesting. That's cool. I wish that could have come to fruition.
Same here. Anyways, before we go on too long and run completely out of time, we do have a second film to talk about. Do you want to introduce us to the second film? Because we have not talked behind the scenes about this film together at all, and I'm dying to get your take on it.
Yeah, so the Hulu original 2022 film, Fresh, basically stars Daisy Edgar-Jones. So she plays this character named Noah, who, she can't, dating is going wrong. The film opens up on her on this bad date of this guy in a kind of hipstery dude who's I don't know, it's just very, starts off almost like your typical romantic comedy of she's just having bad luck with romance. And right when she thinks she's going to give up on dating, she goes to the grocery store and she runs across Sebastian Stan, who is famous for playing Bucky in the Marvel movies, who's this handsome, charming guy. He's a doctor. He kind of woos her in the supermarket. And so they start dating. He seems like the perfect guy. She's basically talking to her best friend. They're going to go away for the weekend. And her best friend is sort of are you sure this is a good idea? Blah, blah, blah. But she's like, no, he's cool. He's so smart and funny. And so they go away, and then she starts to fall unconscious and she wakes up, and that's where the real plot of the movie starts to take place. And I mean, a lot of it's spoiled just by what it's about. So you don't see, it's not necessarily a swerve unless you started it completely blind. But it's a movie, it's a very contained film, doesn't have a lot of locations.
Shot during COVID, so that was
exactly
kind of perfect for that.
Yeah. But it's basically, there are multiple other characters in it, but it's really about the performance of Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar-Jones. And I think Sebastian Stan was fantastic in it. Honestly, I thought he was perfect in that role where he's supposed to be kind of charming, and you're supposed to believe that why this guy could sort of do what he does and allure people and stuff. Tell them what the basic plot is from there. Okay. What happens after she's drugged?
Well, first off, I just want to say I loved this movie, and I loved both of the performances.
Yeah,
Sebastian Stan. Well, I would say that he surprised me, but I already knew he was a really strong performer.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, throughout the entire film, I just kept on getting a smile on my face every time he did something new that just kind of took me to another place. I was very, very impressed with him, and as I was with Daisy Edgar-Jones. And this is the feature film debut of director Mimi Cave, who comes from a dance and music video directing background, and writer Lauren Kahn, who I know less about. I have listened to some really great interviews with Mimi Cave. if anybody out there is a Mick Garris fan, Mick Garris has a fantastic podcast called Postmortem, and he does a nice little 30-minute interview with Mimi Cave that they dive into this movie quite a bit and into her and her process. And so anyone that's interested, I would highly recommend that. But anyways, as James set up, this starts off like a rom-com. I saw some promotional materials at the premiere for the movie where Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar-Jones were standing in front of a sign that said "Meet Cute," MEAT, which I thought was maybe the pun of the year.
Perfect. Yeah.
But it reminded me in a lot of ways of the Japanese Takashi Miike film Audition, in the sense that it starts off like a romantic comedy and it has that vibe for a good while, and then 34 minutes or 33 minutes into the movie, bam, we get the title sequence. And it comes out of the title sequence and we're in a different movie. And Daisy Edgar-Jones finds herself, or Noah finds herself, tied up in what I can only describe as like a very stylish cell. She's chained to the wall and still drugged and coming out of it. And Sebastian Stan is smiling, very non-confrontational, and promising her that he is not there to rape her and that's not what this is. And it was actually pretty chilling. She says, "What are you going to do then?" And he says, "Well, I'll tell you, but you're not going to like it."
Like it. Yeah.
Like I got a chill down my spine.
Yeah.
As he then proceeds to explain that he is going to sell her meat and he's going to kill her too, but he's not going to do that first.
Yeah.
Which is where the title of the movie comes from. She has to be fresh meat. The buyers in this secret club of cannibals, they are only interested in eating fresh meat. So there's actually no reason to kill her right away. And because he's a doctor, he's able to surgically remove what he needs to, drug her up to keep her both complacent and comfortable, and sell pieces of her along with bits and pieces of her belongings. And she comes to learn pretty quickly she's not alone in this stylish little dungeon, that there's at least two other girls in two other rooms connected who were in various forms of amputation. And you don't get to see them. In fact, the one that she talks to the most, I remember Melissa's the one that's further off and has gone crazy. But the one that's in the cell next to her, they very wisely do not show you what condition she's in until towards the very end, because it just keeps you wondering, like, how far is this going to go? Like, how this guy's an expert, it seems. So how far can he go in removing pieces of somebody and keeping them alive and conscious? And he's continuing to come down and make sure that she's fed and essentially happy, because stress is going to ruin the meat.
Yep.
And meanwhile, she has a friend outside who only knows that she went off on this mystery weekend with her new fella. But through a series of circumstances, Sebastian Stan, character's name is Steve in the movie. Steve messes up in covering up the disappearance, and something stands out to the best friend that only the best friend would know, to clue her into something's wrong. And so she starts to investigate, and things go really interesting for her too. She's actually a major part of the movie. I don't want to get too into detail as to what, like I said, there's going to be spoilers in this one, but I have to work really hard to not spoil everything, because people should see this.
Yeah, and it's a newer film, so it's more understandable than fucking Eating Raoul. So
exactly, and it's a much more complicated movie than Eating Raoul.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, she goes looking after her, and that's kind of like your way outside of the room in order to have some sort of relief in the story of at least being able to see something in the outside world, and to get the relief of somebody cares enough to look after them. Because as it's discovered in the film, Steve is particularly good at choosing girls who admit that they have no real family ties, and basically people that fewer people are going to come looking for. And while Noah is tied up, I will say this much, because it's more of a plot point than a spoiler, really. Towards the beginning of the movie, in the rom-com part, she sleeps with Steve and he spends the night, and nothing seems out of the ordinary about it.
Yeah.
But when she mentions that to the girl in the cell next to her, she learns that Steve doesn't sleep with the women that he captures, that she's the only one that he's ever slept with, indicating that he must really like her.
Yeah.
And so she's able to kind of seize on that knowledge as her catalyst to an escape plan. And she starts to build that up. And it takes us through so many twists and turns on her escape plan that at times you start to wonder, like, oh no, is this going to get fucked up? Not because, like, is she suddenly going to want to stay? Is she going to want to join in this grotesqueness? Like, she's actually kind of fooling the audience. But Mimi Cave directs it in such a way that for at least 10 minutes there, you're like, okay, this is taking a completely different turn.
Yep.
And I will say for Stan, he does such a fantastic job. He really falls somewhere in between Hannibal Lecter and what was his name? Patrick Bateman, the American Psycho.
Yeah, American Psycho, yep.
He seems to fit right there in between those two. In fact, the American Psycho comparisons are almost obvious once you see the movie.
He the thing is, he comes off honestly as very kind of normal, like a lot, like he doesn't. There's a practicality to him. He's like, look, I'm doing this because it makes me a lot of money, and you know, it's like even when he tells her like, you're not, I'll tell you, but you're not gonna like it. He's not saying it in this cold. Well, I mean, there's a coldness to it, inherent coldness to it, but it's a cold thing to say to somebody. But he's saying it in a very like sort of like, I'll tell you, but you're not gonna like. Like there's this sort of real reality to him where he's like, he's done this before. He knows how this is going to go. It's just, I like that. I like that he wasn't trying to play it as this, you know, sort of super villain, this cartoonish, like, you know, horror villain, which makes it in its way even creepier because he's saying it's this terrible thing and so nonchalantly.
He's more over the top when he's alone in the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Yes, I agree with that. I do have one fault with, well, I have a few things. So the movie I mean, there's not a lot of like violence or anything in that nature, not to what you might think, but you know, to sort of teach her a lesson, the first thing he does is he takes her ass. He basically takes all the meat off her ass, which is something that you don't really think about, but once you start thinking about it, like that's awful.
Once it's in your head, you don't think of it as something that you might lose.
Never, exactly. And like you don't realize how important your butt cheeks are until you think about like you just would be sitting on bone and but here's the part where I have a problem with it is that there's a love scene that happens later post that, and all I could think about is how would you, I mean, it doesn't, the anatomy is still, I don't know, just like it took me so out of the scene because all I just kept thinking was I mean,
well, if I remember correctly, it never got to that point.
Well, exactly, but his intention is to go through with it, and I'm like, you took her butt, like, not that it's like the butt is. I mean, there's just something about it that I was like, oh, like she's just all raw, buttless. Like, I'm not like, I'm not saying that the butt is all that matters. I'm just saying it's just weird. Like, but the other fault I have, it's not a fault. It's definitely not. My one thing is that at one point, her friend, and this will be, say, I don't want to give a spoiler away, but there's a point when her best friend goes to investigate, and she's trying to find this guy that she thinks or knows, she suspects rightfully that has abducted her friend or done something to her friend, and the scene plays out, and to me, I saw the ending of that scene, the sort of like swerve thing. I saw it coming, and I was like, oh, I wish they would have played it a little differently or not made it as obvious, but that's really the only fault I had was, the assless attempt to make love. And yeah, I know this is a weird thing to sort of focus on. I'm just saying, like, when I thought about it,
interesting line to draw in this film.
It's just like you think about the practicality of it. Taking take the boobs, like the meat out, like there's just the butt serves so much function. The butt cheeks. Think about what a human anatomy would look like with no butt. Like, and I mean, there's lots of people with very small, flat butts, and that's fine. But I'm saying no butt, like literally no meat. It's weird. Anyways, a weird thing to get obsessed about. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't because I'd never seen that movie, and when I thought about it, I was like, oh, that's actually really traumatic. Like, no butt.
Well, it's the perfect thing.
I'm a guy. I don't like.
But it shows how much it got under your skin, and that's what this movie is so good at. It's just,
yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not like, it's not, it's not some vicious, Serbian film. It's not like,
no,
it's not
it's a
going to
fun
those
movie,
places.
but it's the most awkward of fun.
It's very
movies.
fun, but it still gets on your skin without having to go there, which I think is an accomplishment. And they feel like Daisy Edgar-Jones. She starts off as a character that you'd think would just be like a romantic comedy girl, like a kind of girl next door, like lovable, cute,
relatable,
silly, whatever.
We all hate dating past a certain point, like
Yeah.
very relatable.
But her character is a little more complex than that. Like, again, she's trying to manipulate. It's a very smart movie.
It's incredibly intelligent, and I couldn't stop kind of drawing parallels to Get Out as well, which I know Get Out has kind of become the go-to movie for this generation, for this decade. That's become like the pinnacle that everybody aims for, because Get Out was just so brilliantly done. And obviously different movie, different message, different messenger. But in terms of the female experience, I felt like this was very similar to Get Out, in the sense that you're lured into the safety of a relationship, only to find out that you're only wanted for your body, and that your body is going to be intensely violated.
Yeah.
And it actually made a lot of sense to me. I don't know if I can articulate this quite the way I would want to, but the way that in Get Out, they are manipulating the body, the black body, to play into the stereotypes of the superior black body, which, is a stereotype, even if it was a quote unquote positive stereotype. It plays very much into that level of like white racism, that level of, and I think that while that played very well into that messaging, the idea that cannibalism was used in a kind of similar manner in this really kind of represents to me like the way that the female would experience, like it is the ultimate violation of the body. It is the ultimate violation of the body. Cannibalism is.
And it's even like she says, why do you only do girls? And he says, it's just, that's what people want. And it's literally the objective. It's viewing the female body as a commodity in the most literal sense of the term and the most disgusting sense of the term.
Yes. And the people who are paying for the meat from him, he's also packing with it sweaters and shoes and photographs. Like the package of meat comes as a package of who this person is that you're eating. And as you get into the story, without giving anything away, you do start to like see him at mealtime, where there's a name for the dishes, like it's not just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre where it's all in the meat. Like there's a name, there's a personality, there's, and he talks about it when he first starts talking about why he's a cannibal. It's the typical thing that you usually think of in this kind of a scenario where it's like, oh, well, the taste is indescribable and it's exquisite when it's prepared right. It starts with that, but he fully admits later on, but really it's the power. And that's what it is the power. And that goes the same with Get Out. Both of these movies are about people in power who are oppressed, and two rich white people really as the villains.
Yep.
They represent the power and they're keeping these other people down. And I really appreciated it on that level. I'm probably completely unqualified to speak about either of those films on this level. And I wish that we had a guest here who could help us out. In fact, we should probably do that sometime in the future.
Yes. All we can do with those recognize that we see that intent, and
yes. And I think
we recognize that there's a,
it would be completely unfair to talk about a film like Fresh without calling out and appreciating that element of it. I just thought it was beautifully done. Not perfect. I wouldn't compare them beyond this. If I had to say that one was better than the other, then I think Get Out was a more inventive type of horror. But what I appreciated about Fresh was the fact that it was playing with tropes in new ways.
Yeah. I said I had the one criticism, and that's not true. I could criticize a few things, but I guess my other like real big criticism is you do see, the ending is exactly what, it turns into any one of these sort of it's, you know, it's always good to see evil people get their comeuppance. So I'm not even complaining about it. But it didn't.
And boy, does he.
The complexity of the setup and the what's up?
And boy, does he get his comeuppance.
Oh yes, well that's the thing is it's you much like the Quentin Tarantino. Why am I blanking on the name of it? Death. What is it? Death.
Oh, Death Proof.
Death Proof. Thank you. Much like the ending of that movie, it's very the vibe is very similar. But again, who doesn't love watching evil people get their comeuppance? But outside of that, like I will say this carefully, considering who I work for or whatever, but it's almost said that it was like a straight to streaming film because it definitely, I feel like it was definitely good enough to deserve a theatrical release of some kind.
I would have loved to have seen this in the theater. To hear the audience squirm would have upped the experience 100.
I agree 100%. And I mean, that's the world we live in now and stuff, but the fact that it got any kind of release.
I applaud Hulu for giving it a home at all, because this is not an easy movie to market, even with Sebastian Stan. And
well, that's the thing is, I think, I mean, smart, you know, he's a big Marvel, like, you know, and I think he's one of the few Marvel actors who is unlike the Don Cheadles and the Robert Downey Jr.'s. This is a guy on the upswing of his career. Like he's starting his career in film, and like he's gonna I think just become a bigger movie star. So it's good to have him in the movie because his name brings that with it. But it's smart, But the thing is, besides being a big name, he is phenomenally. He's so good at it, I can't picture somebody else doing the role because I see him so perfectly now in that role. So and great to see him doing something completely different than a Marvel movie. So. Great, high recommendation, absolutely. I like to get behind new films. We talk a lot about very classic films, and for good reason. Like I think we also need to celebrate our past, and I think every year some less and less people really give a shit about older films. But at the same time, this is a new film that is really original and unique, and definitely deserving of praise. So I am very happy that we were able to talk about it.
Same here. And before we hang it up on this one, I do have to ask, what did you think of the soundtrack?
I don't know if the soundtrack stuck out to me specifically.
Oh, it did to me.
Full reveal, I watched it while also working.
Okay. Okay.
So my focus couldn't be 100% on it, but I'm trying to think, was there a lot of like popular music in it that I just missed?
Well, there was some popular music in it, but I thought it was... I thought it was interesting. First off, like I said before, Mimi Cave comes from a music video background and a dancing background. So I would expect her taste in music to be pretty interesting to begin with. The one that I think most people that see this movie, or the one that's really going to stand out in their heads, is probably the song Obsession by Animotion, which kind of gets the American Psycho treatment.
Yeah.
With
yes, okay,
and dancing around with like a disembodied leg. But that, to me, that was kind of the easy moment. But I thought it made a really effective use of the Golden Girls theme, for one. The Thank You for Being a Friend.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I don't want to give it away.
Yes.
But there's a moment where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're using Thank You for Being a Friend. And it's not like a cover, it's like the theme from the Golden Girls, which I thought was really cool.
The actual song. Yeah.
And then the obscurity that I love.
God, I completely forgot.
As I mentioned before, the opening credits for this movie don't start until 33 minutes into the movie, when it starts to become a horror movie. But the theme song that's used during the opening credits is a song that I have loved for years and didn't know really that anybody else had ever heard before. And that was I Hear a New World by Joe Meek and the Blue Men. And if anybody's ever heard of Joe Meek,
that's right, Joe Meek. That's right. Interesting.
Yeah.
You're the reason I know Joe Meek. So,
well, he was kind of insane. Well, he was completely insane.
Yeah.
He was a music producer in England in the 60s who was obsessed with the American sound, which is kind of funny because it seemed like the rest of the world was the other way around. In the United States, everyone was crazy about the English sound and was trying to bring about the American Beatles and whatever. But in England, Joe Meek was obsessed with Buddy Holly. In fact, he thought that he could channel Buddy Holly's ghost multiple times. he recorded in a studio in his own home, and he was the type of guy, like, if he was tone deaf, and he wanted his musicians to play out of tune instruments so that they could play it the way he heard it in his head. And if they weren't getting it right, he wasn't above holding a shotgun on them until they could get it right. So he was a madman. He was also gay in a time in England where it was literally illegal to be gay, and was investigated for multiple murders, including one where different parts of a body were found in multiple suitcases all over town. He was basically persecuted because of what it came down to is anytime something came up as a gay crime or a gay murder, anybody who was on file as potentially being gay in England suddenly became a suspect, regardless of whether there was any truth or evidence to support that fact. Like, oh, gay murder, bring out all the gay people. We're going to talk to all of them. It was a really sick time. But in Joe Meek's case, it did turn out in the end, we don't know what else he may have done. And I have a feeling that he didn't do any of this until the very end. He ended up shooting his landlady, who he loved like a mother, and then shooting himself. And it's a very interesting story. If you ever get a chance, there's a lot written on it. There's a fairly decent movie called Telstar about it, but I'm more interested in the real story than in the movie. I didn't think the movie really caught it. But yeah, Joe Meek is a fascinating person in and of himself. And his craziest album was I Hear a New World, which is one of the only ones where he put his own name on it as an artist, because I Hear a New World was his concept album of what it would sound like if Men from the Moon recorded an album. And so to start this movie off, or really to get 33 minutes in and suddenly I Hear a New World, I was like practically giddy. I'm like, oh my God, this person gets it. And to have such an odd personality as Joe Meek represented on a soundtrack like this, that gained my respect instantly. So anyways, we've probably gone on long enough. You probably have to run.
Well, I will say, like, I really enjoy switching up the format. I like doing, retrospectives on directors, but I really like when we get to really dig into the meat of movies a little bit more, really get to explore them a little bit more. And I don't think these are two movies that probably are going to get a lot of, like, podcast episodes and stuff. And again, both are great. I enjoy both immensely. And I think, like, the little weird through line of cannibalism is very interesting. So great decision is you always come up with really great ideas for these episodes, but I feel like anything we can do on this podcast to shed the light on both newer movies that maybe not everybody is watching, but I'll as always also showing again, Paul Bartel is so criminally underrated or criminally underknown, both as a director and filmmaker and as well as an actor and just as a personality. So this was a great episode. I enjoyed it. So thank you, Devin.
Well, thank you for joining me, and I had a great time too. It's always fun to talk to you about new stuff and old stuff. You have one of the most valued opinions in my head.
I feel the exact same way.
So I'm
about myself.
Well, that makes two of us then. All
right. About you, Devin.
But yes, you have got the encyclopedic head, and every time I watch something new, there's the flash in my brain. Oh, I wonder what James thought of this, or I wonder if James has seen this yet. So I'm glad that we can get together.
Trust me, literally, especially if I discover an older movie I've never seen, one of my very first thoughts is always like, I wonder if Devin's seen this and if he's a fan. So, you hold a special place in my heart and head as far as your opinion, your knowledge. So, again, this is always the highlight of whenever we get to do this. And also, dear listener, hopefully, as you may have hopefully noticed, that these episodes are coming out with maybe a little bit more regularity. We hope that this becomes an even more regular thing, that we're able to put these episodes out at a more continued frequency and in pace. So look forward to that. Hopefully that we can continue doing that as well.
Yes, and make sure that you're liking and reviewing our episodes. Look for us on social media at Den of Sin or Den of Sin on Facebook. You can find us just about anywhere right now. We don't have the most amazing social media presence, but we do tend to try to work on that. But really, we like to speak through our podcast the most. So if you can like us and rate us wherever you happen to be listening to us, I would love to start to get some of those numbers up. And the more notice we can start to get, hopefully the more we can start recording. So that it's multiple goals all working towards the one here. But and
Exactly.
I do want to point out to people, I don't know if I've ever even mentioned this. If you go and check us out on YouTube, you can find full episodes on YouTube. But also on YouTube, I attach every episode to its own playlist of material that I've gathered through YouTube that pertains to each episode. Sometimes it's interviews, sometimes it's the full movie, sometimes it's Siskel and Ebert reviews. So look for the bonus playlists for every podcast that we do, and do your own deep diving, and please learn more about the things we talk about, because the whole reason we're here is to spread the word.
Exactly. And like, you know, our whole reason we do this is because we love movies. We love talking about movies, and, you know, hopefully we can, you know, share that love and get other people excited about the movies through what we do. It is Devin, you do put a lot of effort in this. Devin does all the editing. I will give Devin all the credit. He does all the editing. He does all of the advertisements. He does all that work with the playlist. So, you know, it's my hat off to Devin. This podcast, you know, only exists because of you. But to our listeners, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Like Devin said, if you're a fan, let us know through our social media. And again, until next time, Devin, I always appreciate it.
Back at you. Bon appetit.
Perfect. That was fun, man.